It's a very great honor to give this keynote address this afternoon at this National CSO Convention under the theme, The Future of Civil Society in Uganda, the Law, the Politics, and the Money. I was given a particular focus on, and that is designing an enabling regulatory framework for civil society, balancing accountability, autonomy, and impact in Uganda. So overall, all of us are aware that since morning, everyone here has appreciated the work of civil society. They are central in the development of this country because they are doing a lot of work that all of us appreciate. In the morning, it was clear that under the NDP4, they are fully recognized and appreciated. So it means that the debate of whether they complement the government or not is really out of the discussion. So this afternoon, my focus is on designing an enabling regulatory framework. And that's what I was requested to focus on. So to appreciate the regulatory framework, we need to first start by giving a historical background, because all of you are aware that before 1989, there was no specific law that was regulating the sector in this country until when Cabinet finally passed the NGO Registration Act. Before that, NGOs in this country and any other actor from the civil society mainly went under the Companies Act or else the Trust and Corporation Act. So it's only from 1989 that there was a specific law mainly for the NGOs in this country. And that law was in place until 2006 when it was amended. And after the amendment, there was the process of putting in place a policy for the NGO sector in this country. And in October 2010, that policy was finally passed by Cabinet. And thereafter, the policy indicated that there was a need to further harmonize the policy and the act. And that's what led to the NGO Act 2016 that now is referred to as Chapter 103. But of course, that act also led to the development of the NGO Regulations 2017, and also other regulations, rules, and guidelines that currently the sector is using in the country. Last year in 2024, you're all aware that there was an amendment to the act that rationalized the NGO Bureau, and a lot has already been said about it since morning. So it is very clear that the NGO sector already has a very comprehensive regulatory framework. So the conversation right now is focusing on how we can design something that is far much better. And of course, all of you are aware that there's already an exercise ongoing. We have the regulatory impact assessment consultations that are going on. A number of people have been consulted around the country. Consultations are still going on, and that's an opportunity for everyone in this country to ensure that you are able to give your views and have at least a regulatory framework that you all feel you have full ownership for. So in terms of the ongoing exercise of the current regulatory review exercise, the roadmap that is being used, first we started by development of the regulatory impact assessment. We have a draft report. Secondly, we are having stakeholder consultations whereby we are using that draft report to consult and collect more views from different stakeholders countrywide. Once we are done in that exercise, the third bit will be to incorporate those views and help us come up with a draft policy and also extract principles for either amendment or repeal of the current act. Then after that, the Minister for Internal Affairs will be able to proceed to Cabinet with both the draft policy and the draft act and the principles. And if they are considered, the policy will be approved and will continue to Parliament so that all this is actually concluded. So I'm calling upon you that all of you please have interest in knowing what exactly is the area of focus. Now, there are some expected outcomes from that exercise that you need to know. The first one is that we want to focus on compliance with Recommendation 8 of the Financial Action Task Force. I hope everyone in this room knows what the Financial Action Task Force is. I hope you also know what the Eastern and Southern Anti-Money Laundering Group is, because that would be something which should be of interest to you. Under the Financial Action Task Force, there are 40 recommendations that countries globally should comply with. And when it comes to the NGO sector, Recommendation 8 is what should be of interest to you. But also there's an immediate outcome area, and that is 9 and 10, that the sector should comply with. So some of the things we are doing in this particular review process is to ensure that our regulatory framework complies with that Recommendation 8. But also the second outcome we are focusing on is the enhanced relationship and productive synergy between the sector, the government, the private sector, and the development partners. We want a regulatory framework that brings together all those stakeholders to collaborate amongst themselves. The third one is to improve the coordination of the contributions of the sector. Right now, you're aware that the contribution of the sector is not appreciated to the level it's supposed to. In the morning, the EDNPA was very clear that if you asked him for the contribution of the sector, he has no answer to give you. So that is what we want to also look at. But the fourth one is to have a very strong and efficient mechanism for monitoring and ensuring that the NGO sector is compliant. The fifth one is to have an enhanced integrity, accountability, and transparency within the NGO sector. So this particular exercise is going on, and I'm requesting all of you, please pick a lot of interest in it. Now, what I want to do this afternoon, I'm going to pick 6 key areas that we have already picked as we are moving around, and I want to focus on them because we're already picking things out there that should be of keen interest to the sector. Other things are already in our draft report, and I request all of you who have the opportunity to look at it, please look at it and give your input. So the first thing I want to focus on is that what this exercise is showing us is that when it comes to the formation of these organizations in Uganda, they are being done in a very haphazard way and not in a streamlined manner. Meaning anyone can wake up tomorrow, feel like opening up an NGO, either because they want to secure some funding, or else they feel they want to create jobs for themselves, or for any reason, they'll just wake up, go and form an NGO. That is not the problem. The problem is how are they doing it? In most cases, you'll find there's only one person who actually has the vision. The rest of the people who are coming to be part of that organization don't even have a clue of what they're even getting themselves into. And as NGO Bureau, we have seen this over and over again, that so many people actually are forming organizations, but they don't have the appreciation of even why they are forming these organizations. I'll tell you that in 2019, when we reviewed and validated the NGOs in this country, out of the 14,207 NGOs that were registered in 2019, we ended up having only 2,000 organizations that were actually actively operating out there. And I can tell you that from our analysis, much as funding contributed to the closure of so many NGOs, a number of people simply abandoned their NGOs. Meaning that you start an NGO so well, hoping to either get funding or anything out of it, but at the end of the day, because you have not planned your things well, you end up actually abandoning the NGOs. The same goes to dissolution. When people are closing NGOs, I'll tell you that it's mainly only the international NGOs that will have the courtesy to even tell NGO Bureau, we are closing. Almost all the rest of the organizations just abandon them, and you don't even know where they've gone. So what we are looking at is that, can we have a more streamlined arrangement whereby people who are opening NGOs have a thorough appreciation of what they're getting themselves into. Because if they do not have that appreciation, what we are seeing happening now is what is going to happen. They're either going to end up abandoning these NGOs, or else it's just a matter of time they're going to end up running into trouble because they are struggling and they don't even know what exactly to make out of these NGOs. The second key thing that we picked out of this exercise is, of course, the inefficient processes for these organizations to constitute. A lot of the processes are manual, and that does not exclude the NGO Bureau. That the fact that these processes are manual, even the cost of compliance alone has become so high. Right now, as we talk, you see that almost all the regulators in this country have fully automated. It's only the NGO Bureau that is in the process, and we feel that that should really move fast, because you had the National Planning Authority. They are very clear that they need a system that actually can help this country collect a lot of information. So the fact that these processes are manual, the cost of compliance on the side of the sector, but also the cost of enforcement on the government side is extremely high. NGO Bureau has to incur a lot of costs in so many things, just because things which they could have done online, they are now using manual processes to actually have them. So we just hope that once these things are fully automated, then we can have this really embrace the whole automation arena. But also we need to focus on the technology and the digital transformation for not only the government side, but the entire sector as a whole. The future of this sector right now will really be greatly shaped if they all embrace technology. The digital tools can really help to revolutionize this particular sector, mainly in form of the outreach, the efficiency, and the engagements that they can have. Yet, of course, we are continuing to see barriers that are there. We are seeing there's still low connectivity, there is still digital illiteracy. You may assume that everyone understands these things from the sector, but I will tell you that in 2019, when we used an online platform to conduct the verification and validation, we received, I think, over 20 petitions where NGOs were complaining that they don't have internet, they don't know how to actually use the system. So we may assume that this is something that is obvious, and yet it's not obvious. So it means that we need a whole transformation in that particular sector. But also the budgetary constraints that are there, just as it has been indicated, is not also helping the sector much. But as we regulate the sector, we need to really prioritize a number of things when it comes to technology. The first one is that we need affordable digital options and adoption across the urban and the rural. At times we discuss these things and only focus on the urban, yet actually our biggest victims are the people who are in the rural areas. But also we need capacity building in the cyber security and data management. People coming on board digital is one thing, but also people have to understand the risks and threats that are out there when everything goes online. But also we need inclusive digital engagements that bridges the gap instead of widening it. We don't want a situation where everything goes online, then we realize that we have actually left a bigger chunk of the sector behind. So we greatly feel that that digital transformation should be something that is intentional, not only by the government, but by all the stakeholders, but also it should be equitable and secure. So it's important that we need that whole digital transformation. The third issue which we have picked from this exercise in the inadequate capacity of the key actors when it comes to the NGO sector, and also the stakeholders. And of course, what we are trying to say here is that when you go to an NGO, start with the people who are founding it, the founders. Do they even understand what it is to run an NGO? They may have the passion, but do they appreciate what they're getting themselves into? Then look at the kind of people they're putting on their boards. People are just identifying friends, relatives, or anyone who can either rubber stamp a few decisions, and those are the people who end up on the boards. Then look at the members who are put in the register of these organizations, who end up constituting the General Assembly, and end up looking at reports of this organization, and have to look at audited reports, and have to elect a new board. Look at the capacity of the members alone. So it means that if we do not have adequate capacity for the key actors when it comes to the sector, then we are going to have a very, very big problem. It means that we need a lot of training, and right now we are consulting what is the best point for this kind of training. Should we start this training right at the district level before even someone reaches the NGO Bureau? Or should NGO Bureau conduct a training just the way our Minister of Trade is doing for the SACCOs? Before you are registered as a SACCO, you have to be first trained. Then you are given a clearance that so-and-so has been trained and now understands what they're getting themselves into. Then also those who are renewing, should we again train you? So that we are sure that even if you have new board members, new members, we are sure that these people understand exactly what it is to be in an NGO and also having the required things to do. So the fact that organizations end up with people who don't have the required knowledge, the required skills, that greatly affects the entire operations of these organizations at the end of the day. So the fourth thing that we have picked is, of course, the weak governance in operating an NGO. When we talk about the regulatory framework, everyone straight away is pointing a finger at the government. And yet, the meaning of the regulatory framework does not start with the government. It starts right with the NGO. Because before you even come to NGO Bureau, you already have your own internal governing document. And that's actually where the starting point is. But I'll tell you that, carry out an assessment in this room, you'll be shocked that close to 90% of the people don't even know what is in their own internal governing documents. I will tell you that I chair the Complaints Management Committee. I invite people to talk to, but people are more interested in having an internal governing document that is acceptable to the NGO Bureau and are not interested in the content. Meaning that at the point of starting, what they do is they hire a lawyer, or if not, they get a middleman, or if not, they get someone's old document, a precedent. They use, just change a few things, add in your objectives, and there you are. Now, at the end of the day, a number of organizations end up with internal governing documents that they don't even have a clue of what it is. So the issue is, if you cannot comply with their own internal governing document, how do we expect you to talk about the regulatory framework of the entire sector at the national level? So I think the first starting point is the internal governing document. The moment you start your organizations, you bring on board people. You bring members, you bring board members, you bring new staff. Do people take time to build the capacity, to give them an orientation, for people to appreciate that if we are talking about an enabling environment, it starts right from internally before it even goes out there. But this is further worsened that most organizations don't pay attention to principles of corporate governance, in addition to the regulatory framework. And that also has caused a very big problem for the sector. People want to own NGOs. Someone starts an NGO and wants to be everything. I am the founder, I am the board chair, I am the executive director, I am the treasurer. And that is what is happening. I'm not saying to the people in this room, but it may be happening other, because we see it. At the end of the day, a number of people who are even put in those positions are just put there either just for the sake, and you'll find the original founders are still controlling each and everything. So much as we are talking about having an enabling regulatory framework, we cannot also ignore the issue of the principles of corporate governance. So we are recommending that we need to do everything to ensure that this is addressed. The fifth issue that we have picked as we are out there is the issue of the inadequate and the haphazard financing of the NGOs. It's something that already came up in the morning, that much as we are talking about the regulatory framework, we need to also talk about the funding. You cannot separate the two and think one goes without the other. All of you have already appreciated the current situation, that the sector in this country has a very weak sustainability. They are almost fully, or at 98% dependent on donations, not even donations from within the country, but donations coming from out of the country, meaning that at the end of the day, if anything happens to those donations, if those taps close, then it means this organization will not be there tomorrow. You have given hope to all your beneficiaries, and yet tomorrow, anything that happens, then you will be struggling. Right now, from morning up to now, the message is clear. The whole funding arena is shrinking, and it's even getting worse. The funding situation has become so unpredictable. So many organizations are not even sure whether they're going to be having funding next year. But also, apart from the overall funding arena, either globally, regionally, or nationally, we also have a bigger problem within the organizations, which I've already touched on, and that is the capacity. Do people have the knowledge and the skills when it comes to raising resources? Do they also have the required integrity and transparency and accountability in case those fundings finally come? We have seen so many organizations look for funding, but when the funding finally comes, the next opportunity for funding cannot come because they already have serious audit issues. So it's important that we need to address those capacity issues. But also there's a big challenge generally with our donations coming in, because the fact that the donors are few, it has also increased competition within the sector. The competition is so high that everyone is fighting for the little resources are there. But also the conditions that come with this funding are very stringent in that it also poses a very huge issue to the sector. But there are also so many unforeseen circumstances that are coming up. All of you saw what COVID did. As we are still recovering from COVID, next we saw all the wars that are beginning around. Before we knew it, there are also issues like USAID closing. Internally, we saw DGF, and all these are contributing and making the situation worse and worse. So some of the recommendations that we are already pushing for is that organizations need to start paying attention to internal income generating activities. Right now, if you ask so many organizations, how many of their members even pay the mere membership and subscription fees? So many actually don't even pay attention to that now. So at the internal point, that should be the starting point. But also in addition to that, what is the caliber of the members that you're bringing in your organization? Who are the people you're putting on the register? Who are the people who you're putting on your board? These are people who should be having the capacity to put more resources in the organization. But what are we seeing happening? A number of the people who are coming as members on the board, the best they're doing is to take from these organizations. A number of people on the boards and the members actually take so much from these organizations till these organizations actually don't even have the resources to actually execute the real activities they should be carrying out. So it's important that we need to pay attention to the caliber of the members that we are putting in these organizations. But of course, the third one that has been a conversation for a very long time is to also think of now opening a basket fund for the sector in this country. This has been a discussion for a long time. I remember in 2015, Cabinet was okay with that, but when it reached on the floor of Parliament, there was a huge resistance where so many actors in the sector actually lobbied Parliament. And the feeling was that government was going to use that money to actually control the sector. And that was actually put aside. But as we look at the regulatory framework, it's high time we started to rethink all these financial sustainability options that we may have. So some of the financial sustainability things we need to really rethink right now. The first one is strengthening the local philanthropy and domestic giving. Just I think a few months ago, we're in this room, NGO Forum was actually promoting that. And it looked like there was a lot of consensus in the room. But we shall find out from NGO Forum how much has changed, whether the giving culture has greatly improved, because we need to see the giving culture coming out. We have a whole private sector, we have individuals who actually can give so much to the sector. We just hope that can also be achieved. But also when the giving culture is there, it should be supported by favorable tax measures, because it's going to be a waste of time when people are giving and still they are not appreciating it in terms of the taxes that are there. The other thing we need to look at is also forging partnerships with the private sector. The private sector, I think, is a very untapped area when it comes to the CSO sector in this country. So it's important that we need to harness corporate social responsibility and social investments, but also in addition to that, we need to explore innovative financing models that can help the sector have sustainable ways of raising funds. The reason why I'm really emphasizing this is that without strong financial foundations, the autonomy and all the things we are talking about in this room will actually be compromised. So it's important that we pay attention to all this, otherwise the impact of this sector is going to be diminished. So I strongly request that please let's pay attention to the funding arena, and we have to really take it clear. The next thing that is key, and that is the sixth and the last one I wanted to focus on, is the poor compliance with all these requirements of issues to do with money laundering and terrorism financing. I've already indicated at the global level you have the Financial Action Task Force that is coming up to put a lot of obligations. The good thing is that at the beginning of this year, the sector was removed from the list of accountable persons. I think that was something good, that it reduced the compliance level. But if you thoroughly analyze this, it does not necessarily remove the sector from the entire arena. Much as you are no longer accountable persons, you don't have to report to Financial Intelligence Authority. It means that you need to start paying attention to what is happening to all these things at the global level. So, the solution lies in the constructive engagement, and the strong call I'm making today is that the civil society must remain principled, while government must guarantee civic space. Trust building, transparency, and regular dialogues like this one are the anchors that will sustain civil society role in governance. And so the way forward, and some of the recommendations I want to put forward before I actually stop, is one is that this particular convention gives us the platform to shape a shared and a common agenda for the future. Let us emerge from this gathering with commitments: one, to build consensus on reforms to the NGO regulatory framework, just as I've emphasized; two, to reinforce partnerships across civil society, government, private sector, and development partners; three, explore new financing models that strengthen sustainability; four, harness technology for inclusivity and impact; fifth, safeguard civic space through principled and constructive engagements. In conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, let's recommit ourselves to a shared vision, a regulatory framework that empowers civil society, protects its autonomy, demands accountability, and ensures maximum impact in the lives of Ugandans. Together, let us ensure that the civil society remains not only resilient in the face of the challenges that they could be facing now, but also stronger and more united and more impactful in building a just, inclusive, and a prosperous Uganda. Thank you so much for listening. For God and my country, thank you.
Winfred introduced Stephen as our friend, so please let's give him a big round of applause. And if you're a CSO leader and you're not clapping, we see you. We shall wait for your permit renewal. So be careful. Please clap again for Stephen, just in case. And now we're going into the discussion of the issues that he's raised, and we have an incredible, incredible panel of experts. Allow me to introduce Mr. Anthony Masake. He is the Executive Director of Chapter 4 Uganda, and he's done incredible work in this area, including when we were developing the NGO regulations and the NGO Act 2016, now CAP 109. And the second person to invite, I was waiting for you to clap, by the way, I was posing for effect. The second person to invite is someone, if you're an NGO leader, you're a finance director, you should know. Martha Oundo. She's the Assistant Commissioner, National Bureau for NGOs, but she's also in charge of compliance and inspections, I think. So please clap for Martha. And I think before knowing Stephen, you should know Martha, because you will not get your permit unless she has endorsed. So please, Martha, join us on this panel. Our next panel, you guys haven't clapped enough for Martha. Our next panelist is Ms. Judith Atim. Judith Atim is the head of programs at the Center for Constitutional Governance, a constitutional watchdog, and an organization most of you are very familiar with. Please clap for her as she joins us. And then finally, a veteran in the sector. I think he's one of the founders of the Uganda National NGO Forum. So Moses, if Benson Ikwe had not done what he did, you wouldn't have a job today. So please join me in welcoming Papa Benson Ikwe Ochen, who is the Executive Director of the Public Affairs Center. Our moderator is a PhD, real PhD from Makerere University.
From the Center for Constitutional Governance, we have this policy bridge.
Okay. Why are you guys laughing about real PhD? Today we've had a lot of PhDs. But from Makerere University is Doctor of Laws, Doctors of Law, Doctor of Laws, Dr. James Nkubi. He is the Executive Director of the Network of Public Interest Lawyers, NetPIL. Just one thing I will say as James comes, when we were doing the NGO regulations, we worked closely with the Bureau. He was one of our leading experts from the CSO sector, so he understands these issues. And James, please come and moderate this session. Please clap for him.
There are always those meetings after the meeting, so we're having a small discourse to influence the flow. My name is James Nkubi. My name is not James. That's not my name. My name is James. So if you find me after here telling me James, I'll just look at you. I don't know you. I work with the Network of Public Interest Lawyers. I normally hear people saying, I'm team leader. For me, I'm not a team leader. I'm the CEO. That's what I found there. We are here. Thank you for joining us, comrades, this far. The team has been introduced fully that we are going to engage with. Of course, I sympathize with Martha. You are in the room where your boss is. What you say or don't say will be used against you. At these moments, you're better off saying, like Stephen said. Like Stephen said. But we trust in your capabilities, of course, Martha. Thank you so much. And of course, Dr. Stephen, for the the conversation earlier. Our session is a design session. We want to design what the framework is going to be like. We all know the contestation between regulation and the belief that probably there is control rather than regulation. I'm saying belief. It could be perceptional. And of course, this is combined with a tendency where a mere interrogation of civil society is branded an attack. Sometimes we are not prone to interrogation, like what Stephen was saying earlier, interrogating, doing a self-retrospect into the sector. But we are lucky that we are having a clean slate with the coming of the rear. The belief is that we must design, we must co-create with the Bureau, with the ministry, what is the future going to be like. So we want to call our session today a reimagination of the framework in the coming years. And with us is a team that Chris has introduced. I told him he would introduce as I sit there, such that he welcomes me, and I come in majestically. I've always wondered what is a majestic walk, but I've experienced it. It's nothing much phenomenal. But here we are. We shall have a session with the comrades this side, and then hear from you specifically. Because some of you probably have not been reached in the consultations yet, or may not be reached, but we want to use this opportunity to be a two agenda discourse here. How do we safeguard what we have, and how do we develop something greater that is going to take the sector forward? So it is a session of design, and I will give an opportunity to each of us who are here. Of course, Martha is from a different docket, but particularly to the first comrades, of course, the comrades here, on what they think, okay, what they believe are 3 or 5 things that shouldn't miss in what we are co-creating, in the framework coming. What are those 5 or 3 things that you think are critical, that we cannot miss them out, such that as our comrades continue the consultation and the discourse, they can relate with that? This is not a question for Martha, though. I'll have a different one for you. But for my comrades who are coming from the sector, 3, 4, 5 things you think are unmissable. At this moment, of course, you're wondering who's going first. All of you are wishing I don't pick you. Tony, would you want to start?
Sure. Mr. CEO, sir. Thank you so much for setting the pace for this conversation. It's an honor to be with you here today. These are very pertinent things, and if you have followed what Stephen has shared here, we all have a critical stake, both as CSO actors, as development partners, as donors, and all of us in this room, and those that are following online. James, I think the 3 things that I think need to be captured in this framework.
Sorry, did you say James?
I said James.
Oh, okay.
Yes, please. So I think that the first thing really is leaving citizens to have the agency, the freedom of association. So freedom of association, of course, is an inherent right of even the least amongst us. Those that have not gone to school, those that have studied a bit and probably are semi-literate, and those that are advanced as well. And listening to Stephen, I get a bit uncomfortable as far as the issue of the qualifications to start an organization in this country is concerned. If you talk to friends at NUDIPU, the National Union of Disabled Persons, they will tell you that in the district unions that they work with, over 90% of them are either illiterate or semi-literate. But they know their issues, they know their challenges. And the essence of freedom of association is for people to be able to come together to work towards a common goal. So I think the key issue there should be, is it legal? Once it's legal, regardless of that background, I think we can wait, and then if there's a problem tomorrow, then that can be handled. So protection for that inherent nature of that freedom. The second one is a reduction in the number of compliance demands in the laws that we see today. I think that most of my colleagues will agree with me that NGOs in this country over-report. You have almost 10 agencies or committees to report to. I think that needs to come down as far as the law is concerned. The third and maybe the final one in the interest of time is a reduction in the number of committees or other pre-registration processes that we see all over the place. You know, we have, for example, the District NGO Monitoring Committee, the Sub-County NGO Monitoring Committee, the District Technical Planning Committee. These committees are important in advancing decentralization. But if they are established and there's no funding for them to sit to execute their functions, what you're essentially creating are bottlenecks or significant hurdles that NGOs will face in the process of exercising these freedoms. So I think for me, those would be the three quick notes.
Thank you so much. A law facilitative of freedom of assembly. In essence, the legal framework must be resting on that pillar. It becomes the threshold of assessing to what extent the law is reflective of it. And then maybe later on I shall come back to you, Tony. Should it be a reduction of compliance demands or say centralization? In essence, if at all my certificate is also needed by FIA, for example, there should be a central depository where FIA can get it. Should it be a reduction or a centralization? Quickly.
I think it's a bit of both. But first reduction and then decentralization. Okay. I think I would go for both. And maybe if I may just say something in 30 seconds, Doctor. The issue of separating between legislation and aspirations. We all aspire to the great things that, that Stephen talked about here, to have a sector that adheres to corporate standards, that carries out audits on time, and that is structured and very efficient. That's an aspiration. Yes. We are all working towards that. The concern that I have from where I sit as a lawyer is that if you make laws that seek to achieve those aspirations, the exposure to very many organizations that are struggling to get to that level will be so high. And for me, I think we need to be very careful when we're talking about what needs to be legislated and what are those things that we can look at as aspirations that we are all working up towards.
Okay. Or even administrative in nature. Yeah. Thank you so much. Take it away.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. James, and thank you to you all who are here. My name is Judith Atim. I'm from the Center for Constitutional Governance. Well, if I am to contribute to the discussion about the future of CSO, what would I aspire to see happen in the sector? We all know that the sector is overly regulated. We have more than 10 regulations that we all have to comply with. And when Stephen was giving his keynote address, he also made mention of the fact that there's lack of compliance from many players in the sector. And that is partly because of the overly regulated space. So when you look at issues of registration, re-registration, renewal of permits, and so on, and you have to comply to all these layers of documentation or laws, it certainly threatens how much engagement the sector can actually undertake. So when I'm reflecting on the future, I am also wondering, and I want to pose this to Stephen and the Bureau, is it possible for us to still have a regulatory framework that ensures that the sector is accountable, yes, but it does not necessarily stifle its operations? When it comes to issues of, say, validity of permits, why should we have permits for just 2 years? Is it possible to have permits that can last 5, 6, 7 years, so that we don't have to be running to the sector, to the Bureau every 2 years, knocking on their doors? We already appreciate the constraints the Bureau is going through, especially in the wake of rationalization. So we do not, I think it would be a win-win for everyone. The 2,000 NGOs or CSOs do not have to be clogging your drains all the time going to seek renewals of permits if you can give them an extended period. The other issue, I think, taking over from where Anthony stopped, when you look at CSOs in the human rights, governance, and democracy space, for example, we have this overzealousness of security agencies manifested through arrests, harassment, intimidation, and so on. And this, of course, contravenes Article 29 of the Constitution, freedom of association, freedom of assembly, and so on. As CSOs in these spaces, I don't think we can emphasize enough the need for the government and its agents to stop treating CSOs as criminals or as suspects, but rather to acknowledge them as key actors in the development of this country. The watchdog role that the sector plays is crucial for accountability, and that is a win-win again for all of us, for society, for government, for all citizens. So I think when we are discussing the future, this is also something important that we need to also add into that conversation. When we talk about the money, yes, Stephen also made a very strong presentation and emphasized on the shrinking civic landscape, rather funding landscape, which we are all grappling with right now. But of course, we also see some of these laws, the counter-terrorism measures, anti-money laundering, and so on. Yes, we know they are important. We've seen the provisions of FATF. But also the concern is we also wouldn't want to see government hiding behind some of these measures to also stifle the funding or the financial independence of CSOs and NGOs. There has to be transparency. I think Anthony has a very good experience with what happened to them a few years ago in Chapter 4. We all know how that played out. Clearly, we know what happened to the then ED, Nicholas Opio. His phones and gadgets ended up in some other places that, I mean, security installations and so on. So that is also a way of undermining the financial independence of CSOs, which I think when we are looking at the future of what we want the sector to look like should be critically addressed and scrutinized. I did not hear Stephen talk about the proposal requiring prior cabinet approval for funding to the sector for development assistance, including NGO funding, which for me, I think if this policy or this proposal sails through, it would just be adding another layer of red tape to a drain that is already clogged, and we just cannot, afford this. It's an unnecessary, it causes a lot of unnecessary delays in implementation of programs or projects and activities on our part. I don't think this is something necessary. Perhaps there should be a modification or even just an entire ban or removal of these kinds of clauses. I also would have loved to hear what this means to the INGO sector or the funders. And that conversation was not very clear. What then does it mean for funders? Would they also be comfortable having their money put in this basket fund and then cabinet deciding where the money goes? Because I think if this is not something that is well addressed, then we will also see NGO funding or development assistance simply going to fuel patronage networks, which will not be productive for the sector and for the citizens. And I think these are the contributions I'd actually like to see addressed and captured in this regulatory frameworks that we are discussing.
Okay, thank you so much, and I'm sure our rapporteur is on it, but we shall also see or get a reply from you as well. Yes, sir. What do you think?
I think to me, I have been a very good listener since morning.
Yes.
And I think that was good for me.
Kindly pull it a bit closer.
And, if you want to say anything, first listen. I listened to Okello, who is my good friend, and I listened to the director of NPA, and all of them seem to emphasize something.
Yes.
Okello was, in his objective number 4, he talked about compliance. That is important, the sector builds itself. But I want to say a thing. When you ask me what are the 3 things, I would propose this. One is that I would really love and expect reforms that help the sector to build itself from within.
Okay.
You know, compliance becomes complicated and burdensome if the internal operating environment of an organization is problematic. Any reform that affects the internal health, I take an organization as a body. When you fall sick and you go to the hospital, they will administer to you a treatment which builds the capacity of the body to rejuvenate and survive. Not one that takes it or that completely disables it. Any treatment does that. That's why they monitor in the medical terms the side effects of whatever treatment you give. So for me, there are 4 critical ingredients that are so important for the internal operating environment of an organization so that it can comply well. Number 1 to me is legitimacy. How do we become legit? Legitimacy is about the ability to be appreciated, to be respected, to know on what basis you operate. I was listening to my previous panelists. People were quoting the law, or I think it was who said that, you know, principle of state number this says you are supposed to be autonomous. So what is the basis of our work, like us, as a sector? Do we spend time shaping up and building and making ourselves legit so that when we go out there, we are respected, we are understood, and we are defined by what we are? What are our products? When you look at this bottle of water, I even don't know the director, this company, but I know the product. Are we known by the products? What are we known for? So therefore, a reform that comes in should help us to become more productive in refining and defining our products that make us legit. The second principle there is credibility. Is the capacity to be relied on. The energy we put to ensure that we are what we say, we are reliable, we are dependable, we mean what we say in private and in public, we can be relied on. It is also possible that reforms or the legal framework may make people go underground. If you come, I've seen, that's why in the private sector, you hear of smuggling. Why? You come up with the systems that promote that kind of behavior, you are killing the trade, you are killing. The same thing with the sector. If you come up with the reforms that push the sector to operate underground. I was interacting with somebody from Zimbabwe. He said for them, they had to operate 3 offices. There was one non-office, there was another one, and then there was a private one. And for me, it was struggling to understand. He says, you know that when they raid this one, you are safe on the other one. When they attack the other one, you are somewhere, but they see you floating. You see that type of system. So you don't enhance credibility. We must come up with reforms that make the sector to be confident enough to come out freely and speak what they believe in. Third is the accountability principle. Is ability to give account, to report on what you have done, what you intend to do, what are your achievements, what is your mission. For us in our sub-region, as a sector, civil society actors, we have pushed accountability further. We have now introduced what we call social accountability. I'm a member of the District NGO Monitoring Committee. We said now for our members, at least once in a year, you take us and you show with us. That's accountability. How do you report back? So the third principle is power,
The
the
fourth.
ability to influence. And I think this is important. Mr. Okello, I would love to see that the type of reforms you push enhance our influence. Influence is the ability to impact positively. I mean, if you call us for reforms and then exactly what we talked never appears, it doesn't help. So for me, one thing is that we need reforms that help organizations to internally grow and function as organic institutions that will enjoy compliance rather than turning it out into a burden. The second thing...
The second one, you said, no, there were 4.
No,
Yeah.
I'm talking of reforms.
And you've given 4.
No, I was giving the principles.
Oh, so the other ones were the principles?
Yeah.
So we're on the reforms now.
The first one,
In 2 minutes.
we need reforms that help organizations to internally function and grow.
And then there are the 4 principles under that. Right?
Under that.
Right.
The second thing I'm
That's
talking
second,
about
yeah, in the
is
next 2
building
minutes.
trust
Yes.
and reinforcing mutual respect.
Okay.
We have all talked about the sector and the government are struggling from mutual mistrust. We seem to be at war. If you listen to public rhetoric and statements, at one time we even wondering why we were put under the Ministry of Internal Affairs, other than the office of the Prime Minister. Then you will know that at that time the biggest challenge was the problem of mistrust. So can we come up with reforms that reinforce that? And then I think lastly, to me, is protecting civic space.
Okay.
And that's why I was a little bit uncomfortable when the bureau was downgraded into now a department in the Ministry of Internal Affairs. And yet all around us in the region, if you looked at Kenya, remember there was an interesting experience in Kenya during the Gen Z demonstrations. The PBO authority in Kenya was able to defend the sector against accusations of being financiers. They came up because the powers the authority has is that of High Court. It is autonomous. It stands on its own. It is not under influence of any authority. It has the powers of High Court. So we need a reform that will reinforce that, so that the Bureau can stand independently or semi-autonomously and be an anchor of our safety. I don't think in the current arrangement, the secretary of the Bureau can freely, has that power to defend. Instead, it is designed as a regulator. It has to have that client patron relationship. Somebody put it the other way around in the morning. So I think, to me, that is what I think. I would love to see reforms that protect, that build an entity that protects the civic space. I would like to see the laws that reinforce that aspect. The constitutional provisions are already good enough.
Yep.
They define who we are.
Yep.
Article 38 clearly says it is our right to influence the way we are governed, either as individuals, through our representatives, or through civic associations. But now a reform that enforces that, the regulatory framework should be able to, including the autonomy. I'm telling you, recently in our region, we submitted a number of MOUs to the Attorney General for review. It is now 3 months down the road. And just 2 weeks ago, he said it has a lot of problematic issues. He's now calling us for a meeting.
Yeah. You know, they've been in manifesto. They've been busy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So 3
I
months.
think those are the challenges. Yeah. Those are the challenges.
Yeah. 3 months is okay. Thank you so much again. I want to go to Comrade Martha here. Of course, we want to pick your experience. You are the one who is cooking in there. But particularly with all the consultations so far that are emerging from the rear, I'm sure comrades would like to know, just like I would like to know, what are these reforms you're considering to reform the framework within which we are operating to take us forward? I'm sure there are, sneak peeks. This is protected space, by the way. Don't worry about Dr. Okello.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. James.
Yeah, thank you.
With emphasis. You
With
say
emphasis.
it's James, not James.
It is okay, they will promote you direct.
Yeah, I would
Yes.
like to, first of all, thank the organizers of this event, and also in the same vein, acknowledge the role of civil society in the development of our country. It's already been alluded to by the previous speakers, and as well, it's evident within our communities that the footprint of civil society organizations in our communities is evident and remarkable. So I would like to appreciate the civil society organizations for the work that they are doing. And also on the side of the NGO Bureau, we are not treating the regulatory impact assessment process as a regulatory routine, but rather we are looking at using this as a platform where both the government and the civil society organizations can begin to reimagine how to work together to be able to contribute to the development of this nation collaboratively. So moving on to some of the reforms, and I think Dr. Stephen had already hinted on the major issues that were being considered, but maybe I'll just start from where he stopped and go into some of the views that we are beginning to collect so far, what we are hearing from the stakeholders. I know that some of you have not yet been consulted, but the consultations are still ongoing, and we are taking in all the views that are coming through. So some of the areas, I'll just hint on a few because Doctor had already mentioned about 5. We are having questions arising around the relevance of the sub-county NGO monitoring committees. And Anthony,
At the district level?
Sub-county NGO,
Sub-county, okay.
sub-county NGO monitoring committees at the sub-county level. Questions are being asked, are these committees still relevant? Because the truth is, these committees were provided for in the law right from 2010 when the National NGO Policy was put in place, and also still included under the NGO Act, CAP 109 now. But the fact is, as we have moved around, we have noticed that many of them have never been operationalized. They are not doing what they're supposed to be doing within their different districts and sub-counties. So some of the questions that we are beginning to hear are these committees still relevant? And I guess that is something that people in this room can as well consider and also submit views on during this process. The other issue that is arising is on the district NGO monitoring committees. There have been questions around their financing, for instance, because we've heard from the stakeholders that some NGOs have been pushed to finance the district NGO monitoring committees in their operations because they do not have a provision